Oh, thank you. Thank you, Bruce and Cal. Aloha. Aloha. Okay, tough audience. Hola, okay. By a show of hands, how many of you compete with Disney? How many of you are in or hoping to be in the service industry? Okay, wow. Bruce, you're not, oh, okay, just checking. Okay. Robert Greenleaf came up with the term and coined the phrase servant leadership. And it begins with the desire to serve. And then comes the natural feeling that one wants to lead. And then conscious choice brings you to aspire to lead. But this is the test. Do those being served as persons, do they grow? Do they become more, while being served, healthier, freer, wiser, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? That's the test. If you're doing it right, that is the litmus, and that'll let you know that you're doing it well. Now, what we're going to cover, and I promised the cameraman that I'm not going to move around too much, but, no, okay. He is not sleeping back there. We're going to first cover the 4 factors of business success, and this is regardless of what business you're going into. And then we're going to also go over the different phases of perspectives for the organization. And then we're going to really hit the levels of service. And then servant leadership is the apex of what we're going to talk about. Now, some people have referred to change happens a little differently. They use a little shorter word. But it does happen. And the 3 things about change is it's constant, it's inevitable, and it's essential. If you get nothing else from this lecture, I want you to remember, nothing great has ever happened without change. Now, let's do a little historical analysis of the workforce. Way back when, everyone was either a hunter or a gatherer. You went out, you got your food. You were either successful or you won't. Then came the agricultural age and people became farmers. People were putting seeds in the ground, planting them and claiming to get 50 times more from what they did than these hunter-gatherers. Well, were they right? This is participation time. They were right. And that resulted in a 90% downsizing of all hunter-gatherers. Okay? But then we got into the industrial, where efficiency was the thing. They produced 50 times more than the farmers, to the extent that today only 2% of the workforce are farmers, and yet we produce more than they used to. But now we're in the information and knowledge age. We now produce 10,000 times more than the industry age. And the big problem that people are finding is they're trying to do things the way they used to do them and finding that they're not quite working. Well, why? It's the speed has increased dramatically. So the biggest challenge to managing change is the instability, uncertainty, and stress. Because if you don't manage this change, you're going to be left with instability, uncertainty, and stress. And a lot of people say, what's the difference? And it's like, at least you have a bit of a handle of how much instability, how much uncertainty, and most importantly, how much stress you have. There's 3 ways to deal with change: reactive, adaptive, proactive. What are most people and or companies? Reactive. Does anybody know about how many, what percentage? Well, not quite that bad, but it's about 80. And about 15% are adaptive, and then we have those few that are proactive. What would you rather be? Okay. Now, I've just gone on a little tour of change, but what we're asking for and what we're seeking is a transformation. We want something different, because change is just substituting one thing for another, this for that. But a transformation, that's to cause this metamorphosis in who you are and your state of being. It's like when carriage makers transformed into an automobile factory. They are different. They function differently. And the reason we're bringing this up is there is an impending change coming. You're approaching this. Believe it or not, there's a declining workforce out there. Almost 2/3 of men and women would like to reduce the number of hours they work in a week. Anyone in this group not part of that? You and you just come up. I have a really good therapist that I can, because how many of us don't want to go to a job that requires 60 to 70 hours a week? We don't. You want to have a life. You want to, well, pretend you have a life, right? Also, when they were doing a glass ceiling study, they were trying to find out how this had improved the number of women in the workforce. This totally blew their minds. 15% increase of the number of stay-at-home moms. And I'm not talking about women that work out of their home. These are, I am now leaving the workforce and I'm just going to stay at home. They did not expect to see this. And this is a big one. And when I started teaching this 5 years ago, 2010 was like forever away. But how many weeks before we hit 2010? And this is what we're having. Half the workforce is getting ready for retiring. There's close to 80 million jobs and only 44 million people ready to take over them. So now let's get into the 4 factors of business success. And they are productivity, profitability, retention, and customer satisfaction. And it doesn't matter what business you're in or what you're doing, these are your dipsticks. If these things are being handled well, everything else is fine. And I'm just going to go on this briefly because Bruce has asked that I stick to servant leadership a bit, but I just want to set the tone for it. 50% of professional workers' skills become outdated in 3 to 5 years. Now, when I am speaking to a business class, I can just simply say, are you still doing the same things that you were doing for your job 5 years ago? No. And it doesn't matter what they're doing. My wife was a nurse. She's scared to death to go back into nursing because some of the things they used to do are now illegal because they found out that it just wasn't the right way to do it. It's constantly changing, constantly evolving, and that's the way it is for everyone. Now, I spend a lot of time with IT. When we spend $1 on IT training, it brings us $30 in productivity back. Try to get that from a bank. I don't care what CD it is. You just can't do that. Profitability. In the computing sector, every dollar invested in technology certification yields $300 in return. That's a pretty good investment. The problem is, a lot of times you're going to be taught that this is what? This is an asset. This is an asset. I'm a what? I'm a liability. You've passed your class, but please don't do this in business. Who's your biggest asset? The people. Okay, don't ever forget that. An increase in $680 per individual in training gets you about 6 percentage points return on investment. Again, try to do that at any bank. Try to